Welcome back to Deep Thoughts. Today I'm just going to talk about everything. This will be everything part one. What do I mean by everything? Well, what's very interesting is that in the last, I'd say, a couple months, my friends who are at various stages of waking up, I have friends that have been awake for 20 years before me, and they're younger than me. That's no joke. Because there are so many avenues of unknown at this junction, and so much material about each individual maybe glitch in the system or just evil that's allowed to be perpetrated on this planet, my friends are having these gestalt moments of everything and wondering what the hell's going on. You think you know history, and then you learn that you've been lied to about history. You think you know science, and then you realize you've been lied to about science. We've always had the unknown of love, spirituality. We know that we've never really solved for God. And, as much as a Christian will try to bullshit themselves that Jesus is the only one, they really are questioning it deep down inside. They do question every single day, which is why when you question their belief system, they absolutely lose their shit. All right, if you believe your name is your name, and I come up and start doubting your name, you're just going to look at me like, I'm really sorry, you're crazy. But if you doubt your own name, and then I start doubting your name, but you really like your name, and you want your history to be what it is, and how you got your name, is based on the fact that you're some superhero from God, you're going to get angry that I'm questioning that, right? So what's happening is that my friends are getting this sense of uneasiness about them, about the world, when they wake up in the morning and try to discover their purpose and try to go for a purpose, try to find out what really matters, because we're raised with indoctrination to believe that something matters, and we find out in the end probably doesn't. We find out that we want money, some of us, because you're raised thinking that's the way it is, and then you realize, not the most important thing in the world. When you're alone, by yourself, it doesn't matter how much money you have, trust me. Some people work really, really hard to burn out the circuitry in their soul so they don't care. I think I said a long time ago that when I first moved to California, I was by myself, which is fine with me. But I was raised in the Midwest with my family around me, and it was only like a couple of years I lived in Massachusetts, where I didn't have like instant access to family. But even then, I flew back. But when I moved to California, there was nobody here, just me. I was making friends, it's the only way I could do. But I was extremely, extremely isolated for the first 12 months, and I mean really isolated. So my closest friends were my work associates, and thank God they were some of the best people on planet Earth. I mean, the amount of Facebook's likes I have, or I guess friends I should say, I have from 1987 is actually pretty remarkable. Probably just shy of half a dozen, which that's pretty amazing for back in the day. One of them became one of my best friends for life. But, for that first year, I had to burn out the circuitry of my soul not to care. Thanksgiving comes around, you can't care because you can't fly back. Christmas, I did fly back. And it was always like I was homesick to go home at Christmas, and then by the time I had spent, it's like 9 days, I was eager to get back home. Well, to my new home, California. But I find that pattern, the reason why I share that is that I'm finding that people are doing that right now with their reality because they are trying not to care about that which they cannot control, So here's how this episode should be framed in your mind. When you listen to this, I'm not sure how your mind's eye sees it. You're in your car, you're someplace in your office. I know some people listen to this and do other things, do creative things. But let's do this. For those of you coming through what I'll call radio, I want you to think about me in some really cool location, bringing you essentially news from the far side, thoughts from the far side, from the deep thoughts of the MK Ultra Radio channel. Obviously, if you're listening to me, you are not a human being that takes everything that I say and you believe it. And that's the beautiful thing. When people argue with me, not even really argue with me, but disagree with me through the comments on Facebook, it shows intelligence for all of you. And I don't care if you think the world's made of a big marshmallow. That's all right. That's all right. If you got the guts to say I still subscribe to the marshmallow theory after listening to everything else you say, then cool. Share how you get there, Maybe I'll believe it too. But if you're coming to the video, I'm sitting on a patio, smoking a premium cigar. I haven't smoked that much recently, but on the show at least. But I want you to think of this as almost, and I got to be careful here because I'm not trying to go for some Jim Jones freaking Koresh vision in your brain. But think of this as our club. Not my club, and I'm not your leader. I am one of the guys that has the microphone at this point. You get the microphone the second you put the cursor in the comment section in YouTube, to be honest. You get the microphone when you put the cursor in the comment section on Facebook. Right? So we're always passing the mic. But let's think of this as our holding spot. This is the mezzanine of reality where we don't have to deal with anything, but we can analyze everything. Let me further define that. When you're forced to deal with 9/11, you have to have a bunch of emotions. When you're forced to deal with a belief in God, you're going to have a lot of emotions, right? On down the line of everything else we discuss on this show. Okay. Here, when you're listening to the show, when you envision us together in this show, all pulling our consciousnesses together, I want you to think about the fact that you're in the center of the storm. And this eye of the storm is spacious. It actually could be infinite, right? We can just keep expanding the eye of the storm. And unlike normal eyes of the storm, this one's stable. When you take a folding chair, from the edge of the room and you bring it into the center, or you sit in a luscious smoking chair, whatever it is, no one can mess with you and no one will mess with you. When you're here, you're safe. When you're here, you're safe to have whatever thought you want. You are safe to disagree with everyone as much as you want. I made a Donald Trump episode, had some of my closest, like-minded individuals completely disagree with me. Hey man, hats off to you guys. One, I love the fact that I don't have pandering friends. I consider myself friends with people really far away who have only known through the show. And to be questioned is to have someone sort of shake me and say, you sure, dude? You sure this is what you believe? Right? I think you might be being had. What I would love for you to feel while listening to the show or watching it is that when you're in the center, and if you're listening to me in a particular episode and you're just totally disagreeing with me, my Trump episode, it's tough. I listened to it. I was like, damn, I can't wait to replace this episode. It's very angry, but it's also very important, But I'm in the center. When we're in the center, let's put it that way. It's an area of patience and love. And because every single person who has walked to the center of this collective mind has definitely had to walk from the storm, the turbulent parameter of the storm. You get hit in the face by the wind and by all the obstacles that are sucked up in this cloud. You know that you have been certain about something and then had it absolutely crushed out of your soul. The validity of NASA, for instance, is something I think most of us grew up with. We totally trusted that organization. They had decades and decades and decades to correct wrongs, and instead of doing that, they continued to go down the line of deceit. And so at this point, that organization is absolutely unforgivable in our center consciousness. Because in the center of this consciousness, what we're trying to amass is a blueprint. Maybe perhaps if you want to go sci-fi, we got some 3D modelers in the center with little laptops, really powerful laptops. They're sitting in their comfy chair, and we're all in there. And as we construct reality at the center of this thing, they're constructing sort of a Tower of Babel, right? And some days we have good days, and we think we've got it. We put a few new stories on there, a couple new walls. We do some interior design of what we think was in one of the floors. And then we hit another piece of information that absolutely undermines some of the substructure to those second floors. And so it starts looking like a Death Star trying to be created, although that's a negative construct. But it sort of looks like a partially rezzed up building, because we are trying to figure out, it's like putting together pottery. It's like putting together a piece of Greek pottery, and we got a bunch of little tiny pieces. And we're trying to do our best to figure out what the illustration is on the outside. We're trying to decipher the language. We're trying to figure out, why is this made? When was it made? That's reality for us, right? My friends are struggling. I don't get to struggle as much anymore. My struggle was back in the day when I couldn't believe that people were so evil. I didn't know about, fake massacres. I thought everybody was dying. But what I'm getting is a much more obtuse feeling from people. They even struggle to explain their uneasiness. And to be honest with you, I'm getting excited. So I'm sitting in the middle of this room of ours, and I am excited that, I'm not excited that people are feeling uneasy. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm getting excited about is, and this is what I told my buddy, I said, look, you're uneasy because you're discovering a lot of amazing information at this moment in time, and it doesn't sound like you've doubted much prior to this moment, prior to maybe the last 12 months. And everyone has, conspiratorial secrets that they know. One of my friends is from Taiwan. He knows a lot about the Chinese history, and he blows my mind. Like every week, he'll bring out some piece of Chinese history, and I'm just like, dude, I had no idea that that's what was going on, right? And we are also reinterpreting this with a grain of salt, because so much history's been lied about, but it's just phenomenal. There's areas of the world I just didn't know what the hell they were doing. Like during World War II, what was China doing? I just didn't know, But what I keep telling my friends, I said, look, here's the big upside to the uncertainty of existence right now. Everyone's waking up. The world is in an absolute global consciousness of waking up. And because of the 10 monkey principle, and I'm not going to re-explain it, I forgot what episode I totally have covered this, but I covered it 3 times in 80 episodes. But we exude intelligence simply by being in proxy with someone else, meaning being close to someone. If you know how to play a guitar and you stand in line at Starbucks, every kid around you is getting a brain transfer how to play a guitar. Now they may be unable to accept it permanently into their system, but the more of us that wake up to chemtrails, that wake up to GMOs, that wake up to false flags, to wake up to Middle Eastern wars, to serve bankers through protecting oil, which protects fiat currencies, all that kind of stuff, right? Everyone's waking up. When I woke up in 2005, hardcore woke up. Nobody was awake. Imagine having no one to talk to. Imagine having people think you're crazy if you mention anything. And now we have had so many beautiful documentaries made online. A lot of them are probably not true, but we have enough that are true, backed up facts that you get to hear the flavor that works for you, Like for me, Loose Change worked for me. And for Kyle, my co-host in the other show, it was Zeitgeist the movie, the first one. So I'm telling my friends, I said, look, you're fortunate. You get to just sit down and have a conversation with people about your new discoveries. I couldn't do that. I was totally isolated. So this is the good news. And the good news is this frequency, this snowball rolling downhill, is starting to Starting a lot bigger, a lot faster, and that's the way it always happens, an exponential growth, which is why I will warn you, they want to have an establishment person become president in the United States of America. And there was probably 3 or 4 of you that said, careful with Trump. He might be a shill. I will tell you that, and one person thinks that this flappy boy who jumped over the fence and was running at Trump, that Trump knew that was occurring. And I'll tell you what, if you think that was, if you think that Trump knew that was happening, I will tell you this much: you've never been in a fight in your life, a real fisticuff, pound someone's face fight. Because I'll tell you what, when Trump turned around, that was a panicky turn. That was a jittery, panicky, holy shit moment for that guy. And you only see that a couple times when shit gets hot in a room. So I disagree. And I would say you've rarely seen chaos in your lifetime if you think that was... It might have been set up. I mean, obviously, the guy planned to do it. I think the Secret Service, as much as Trump gave them accolades, I think they did a horrible job stopping that guy. But then I think Trump's details about a fourth of what it should be. And I think they're going to try to keep it that way to remind him we can kill you at any moment in time. Not to digress too much, but I'll say this much. The protest that George Soros is paying for on behalf of Hillary Clinton to blame Bernie's group for protesting Trump, if you can follow that, it's all been a setup such that when someone does murder Trump or attempt to, and I think there will at least be an attempt on his life, I guarantee it, they're going to say it's a crazy black person from Black Lives Matters. They're going to say it's an immigrant that disagrees with Trump. They're going to blame it on one of these radical groups. Could be even some white guy. They'll find a way to do it. But they're incubating up your consciousness that at the end they can pull that trigger on him, literally speaking, and everyone's going to buy it who is asleep. And then they're going to go cast their votes for Hillary. So, anyway, back to everything. Back to waking up. One of the toughest things to come to grips with about reality is that we do seem to have people in the world that are inhuman. They do not appear to have the basic compassion that the rest of us have. The empathy that most of us have for each other. And let me throw you out an idea that combines two things. Because I've been in video games my whole life, right? David Icke says that there's a interdimensional reptilian race. It has to be reptilian, right? It has to be exactly reptilian. That infiltrates the bodies of human beings and controls them to be sort of these kind of people that have no morals and have no empathy. And that's the way the group of people who believe in that explain that, because they definitely can prove to themselves that these leaders of the world seem to be robotic automatons that don't have truly the compassion of a real living creature. And then there's a camp that believes that we are in a computer simulation. Now, the absurdity of that comment is that every single thing that exists it is a computer. Everything's a computer. We live in the reality of mathematics. All mathematics are discovered, not created, and they compute. That's what math is. So we've always lived in a computational universe. So you can keep zooming back a macro view of the universe and keep saying, "See, look, it's a computer." There's nothing ingenious about that. There's nothing profound about that, and there's absolutely no discovery that's actually occurred. All you've done is given a decent word to something that's existed since you've existed, whether or not your soul's infinite or not. But then there's another group of people that believe, without a shadow of a doubt, and boy, there's some evidence to really shake up your brain in this, that the world is a flat disk, that the outer edges of the disk are chilled by a firmament, a container, sort of like a snow globe, but more, instead of being, really almost, it's not like a canopy on a cop car, like not like the little light on a cop car. It's more like a domey sort of thing. But the outside is so cold that it freezes the edges, which freezes the atmosphere down, which is when we go up, it gets cold, and when the water hits it, you get these giant cliffs of 300-mile deep, several mile high ice barriers around Earth. That the Antarctica is not an island, it is a barrier, which is why when people try to sail around it, they spent 4 to 5 years trying to get around the Antarctica. Some of them gave up. They said it's 60,000 miles around at least. One guy said it was 40 and he gave up, I think. Another guy went the whole distance. It was just shy of 60,000 miles around. That's not the Antarctica we know, which is supposed to be 4,000 miles around, roughly. But because it's a disk on the outer edge, that's why it's so many tens of thousands of miles bigger than what's in the center. Yeah, I don't know. Supposedly that's really old historical documents about these sailors. All right. So we have 3 forms of reality that are considered very fringy. We know that there are people that behave in what Carl Sagan would categorize as the R-factor brain. So people think reptilian, interdimensional. And they say interdimensional because there's nothing that we can observably see that makes any one of these people different, right? The Queen of England looks like a human being, and so they think, well, if she is behaving so R-factor, then she must be infiltrated psychologically, interdimensionally, by an unknown entity, which makes her that way. Okay? That's what the assumption there is, that she was born human being and that she was infiltrated by a foreign body. That's what that theory suggests. Then again, you have these other folks that say, oh my God, the whole universe is a computer. All right? And then you have folks that say, we are in a petri dish container, and it's just like all of the tales of reality up until maybe 500 years ago when the heliocentric ball Earth started to surface. And for those of you who are rolling your eyes about flat Earth, here's your big step the fuck back moment, right? All the continents are shaped different than the globes that you've actually seen as a child. The real map of the globe is the Peterson projection map, which makes all of these continents different shapes by a long shot, much more vertical than horizontal. All the pictures from NASA that you think prove the world is a globe all match the globes that are wrong. So if NASA had ever been in space, I mean really, really far away space, and taken a picture of Earth, none of the continents would match the Peterson projection, or none of them would match the globe. They'd match the Peterson projection proportions. And when they did supposedly take a picture of the blue marble from Apollo 17 on the way back, they screwed up the Black Sea, and it's a jagged edge on the first negative because it was all stitched together by U-2 plane photographs, most likely. Okay, so there's your problem. You've never been in space to confirm the world's round, and the people that have lied and produced fake photographs. So really sorry. But let me bring these 3 other theories together very quickly for you. You know, art imitates life. They always say that. Most of you are aware of what a MMO is in the video game industry, but just for those of you maybe a little bit older, it's a massive multiplayer online game. MMO RP is a massive multiplayer online role-playing game. It's the bigger version of the acronym. How do we make these games? What's the anatomy of an MMO? Well, if anyone's ever showed you World of Warcraft, it's probably one of the best examples ever. You log in, you create a character. It's an avatar of you. Then you log into the world, and you're a little puppy. You're like, first level, and you have to go do some stuff, kill some bad guys, kill some animals, collect some stuff on the ground, and then you bring it back to your quest giver, turn it in, you get experience, and then there's a leveling process that happens. Your character gets stronger, and you gain stuff to dress up your dolly. The game's really a doll dress-up game. That's what most of those Diablos are. It's genius, right? You want to show up looking hot. That's the only reason why you play the game. You want a nicer-looking mount, nicer-looking armor, nicer-looking weapon. That's the addiction there. But what's the anatomy of the game? Well, I'll give it to you straight. There are what we call player characters, human beings that log into this game, and take over an avatar and tell it what to do. And then there are things called NPCs, non-player characters. Non-player characters are all the characters that the computer simulation are playing for you based on some artificial intelligence. They're the vendors who sell you things. They're the quest givers who give you quests. They are the bosses, the mobs. Some of the non-player characters are animals. They're little frogs that jump around, which are actually local inside your computer's memory. They're not transmitted between computers. Then you have a cheetah that's just pacing around, stealthing around that you can kill. But that one's transmitted between you and all the other guys' computers, so everyone sees the same animal, and whoever gets to it first locks in the battle. Man has created MMOs. Man's created MMOs, and we have made that metaphor of existence. Human beings that inhabit avatars. We play a game where we create NPCs. We construct fantasy continents, cities, streets, dungeons, places to go. We construct the laws of physics, which says you can do this, you can't do that. For instance, World of Warcraft has never created a pure sense of you can fly by yourself, like Superman. There's a druid that can turn into a bird, but then you have bird mechanics and you can fly around as a bird. But most of us have to buy mounts, and the mounts have physics that allow the mounts to fly around. All right. Now let's go bring those other three things back together again, under the pretense that maybe we're living in an MMO of its own sort. What's the world sort of look like? Well, the world is the firmament. It's a dome. We're in the middle. Yes, it's a computer, because everything inside this dome is computed. We can also make up anything that we want in terms of physics. So in the flat Earth model, you have the sun and the moon chasing each other about 3,200 miles over the disk. Completely resolves all of the temperature anomalies that we have, where the South Pole is way colder than the North Pole, something that's impossible with the heliocentric 23-degree tilt Earth model. Even having ice caps doesn't make any sense when you start tilting it closer to the sun. The fact that somehow the equator is warmer than the North Pole and South Pole is utterly an IQ test everyone's failing, if you believe it. But now let's take this reptilian thing and our leaders, who seem not to have empathy. They're bizarre automatons. And they seem to be in charge constantly. Nobody good is ever in charge. Isn't that weird? What if all the leaders of the world are NPCs? What if all of you are super mega wealthy that never do anything good with their money are all NPCs? But the Pope would be an NPC, wouldn't he? He doesn't do anything good for anybody, ever. They never, like Kyle says, the Catholic Church never shows up to a disaster with C-130s with big, crosses on them, where they land and they open up the back and a bunch of blankets and food comes out. They never do it ever. They keep that treasure in the bottom of the Vatican because Jesus is all about keeping possessions coveted. Now, let's go one step further than that. Why would they have made this? Why would anyone have made this place? Now, like I've said many times on the show, I don't think we die. I don't think it's possible. Do I think this avatar dies? Sure, absolutely. Do I think that life should be handled willy-nilly because I think that we do reincarnate and there's some ecosystem outside of this? Hell no. We're supposed to be learning something right now in this body, in this world, in this time, whether it's difficult or easy. But now what if there is a collection of beings, which are us? If you can hear me and you know you're not an NPC, then I'm talking to you. And they're trying to incubate up our being. And what if there's other states and other locations in the non-visible universe to us where we get to cohabitate if we can prove that we actually have the maturity to be there? And what if We are simply going through this particular stage of the firmament to see whether or not we are qualified to advance to the next level. This quite literally is a maturation game where they're trying to mature us up. And it's a test. And there are times when the test is easy, and there's times when the test gets hard, like all tests. Perhaps we're just here forever until we reach our graduating consciousness level. It's not you're here for X number of years. You're here until you grow up. And it's not a slight on you. It's not you're stupid. It's just everyone gets a free rein to mature up. The NPCs are here to create resistance, chaos, perhaps, to make sure that we have something to combat, to make us what we are, right? There's an old movie, Karate Kid. There's a bunch of films like this, right, that are better than Karate Kid. I want to bet a third of you have seen Karate Kid. Ralph DiMaggio, one of the most bizarrely feminine guys, becomes this Karate Kid. And how did he get there? Well, Mr. Miyagi puts him through all these trials and uses sort of everyday chores to do it. Wax on, wax off. Remember that? It was only through that huge rite of passage, that training session, again, there's 1,000 movies that have done this, that he actually gets to become considered capable of fighting, capable of sustaining his life. Now, this is a violent example. Put in a nice, tournament format, but we're in a world where we need to most likely take our power pattern, our souls that have a pattern of mathematics, of complexity, and just like a human being that sits down in front of a computer and types in lines of code, creates object classes and architects it one way or another, right? When you build an application, there's usually 1,000 ways that you could have built it, but there's some ways that are more efficient than others. And over time, you become more and more efficient. You learn patterns, and you start to just write less code. You model your architecture after the hardware so you don't put things in memory you don't need, etc., etc. Now imagine that this is a big giant computer, just like Douglas Adams said in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But instead of trying to calculate the answer to life, the universe, and everything, it's merely trying to incubate up human beings, or I shouldn't say human beings, the souls that go inside of a human being, to be as mature, thoughtful, empathetic as humanly possible. I'll tell you one thing about creative people. I'll give it to you two different ways. When I met I met a group of people at Blizzard Entertainment, the people that make World of Warcraft and Diablo and StarCraft and all those things. I never met a better group of human beings in my life. Just every single person was humble and kind to each other and just thoughtful. Didn't matter if they were gullible or anything. That just never even goes into your brain. You don't care what they believe. They do believe in being nice and kind to each other. And when I look at what they create, they're the biggest video game company in the world. Technically, they purchased, Activision bought them, and they bought Activision back. But the reason why they create beautiful, sweet, wonderful things is because that's who they are as human beings. The whole company. It's crazy. I'm sure there's a jerk or two in there, but I haven't met them. In Hollywood, the group of people that made all the movies that you love, well, depending on how old you are, from like 75 to say 83, which is the end of the, I don't remember when Indiana Jones knocked out, I know they knocked out 3 in like late 80s, but Indiana Jones 1 and 2. All those amazing movies are made by the hippies that turned into executives, that turned into productive human beings. They're the people that worked in the communes, that didn't leave it up to everyone else. And they're the guys who left the communes when they realized socialism doesn't work, right? But it's almost as if, for me, they have acquired almost their PhD to get out of this place. And the more that they become kind-hearted individuals, they just sort of harmonize with the universe better, and they end up creating beautiful things. It's almost as if the universe gives them more ideas and gives them more resources and brings them together, because they're at that level of, it's like they're seniors in college. It's almost like, when you come in as a freshman in college, you're overwhelmed. You don't know where to go. You don't know how the cliques work and how the teachers work and all that stuff, right? But when you're a senior in college, you're walking around with your chest puffed up because you feel good about yourself. You're familiar with all the nooks and crannies of where things are, where the bathrooms are, where the stores are, where the drinking fountains are, all that stuff. You're an authority. You go into your postgraduate work, it just gets more and more intense, right? Which is why some guys and girls find it very difficult to leave the educational institutions, because then they would have to go out back into private sector and they're back to square one. Now, I would encourage you to always go for the adventure. Makes you a better person. But these people that I'm talking about have this amazing, unanimous quality to them. And they don't complain as much. They do look into the abyss of darkness, and they find ways of making it, I don't want to say not matter, but they find a way to continue focusing on creating positivity in the universe. And I think that's what we have to do. I think it's fairly common knowledge among people like us, those of us in the center of this room, that we've been utterly lied to about history, right? I had a listener post a lot of really interesting comments. I want to make something very clear about my perspective of this, and for some of you this is not a new thing, but when you come at me and try to say that the Bible is a historical document that you can use as a reference to refute other more substantiated history, right? When I go to Egypt and I see sandstone that is etched, the only question is, was this etched in a more recent time than when we believe it was etched, which is a long time ago, without putting a date on it, right? For me, the fact that the etchings of the Egyptians are black African people, without a doubt. When you look at the bust of King Tut, that's a black person. That's not an Arab person. Really sorry. Nefertiti's bust, definitely more of a Caucasian-looking cut of a darker culture. I really liken it to the native Indians over there. But regardless, to come in and say, oh, but the Bible says this and the Bible says that, I want to be really upfront. The Bible is complete fiction based on a little bit of fact. All right? Let's not drag in mythos into historical analysis, because if we do that, then we have essentially opened a back door to allow fiction and crazy and emotions that aren't based on reality into the mix to decide how we're trying to build our tower in the center of this simulation, right? Which is our image of everything. The reason why Israel exists is because we allowed that exact mechanism to take effect. We went to the Jewish people and said, why should you have this land of Israel? And they went into their fictional book, their Torahs or whatever, and they quoted back to us fiction that they had written down about themselves. And then a bunch of indoctrinated people who have their own fictional book called the Bible go, yeah, of course. My biggest disagreement with Donald Trump is his perspective on Israel, right? Totally, I think I'm almost completely opposite opinion of his about Israel. That's a big deal. But overall, I don't really care about foreign policy as much as I care about anyone's perspective of saving jobs in this country, reversing educational problems, and thus fixing the economy and our, gross domestic products. Once you see the 108 photographs that have been collected, which is the rebuilding of Stonehenge in 1954, and then you go to Wikipedia to kind of give, was it Whiskey Tango Foxtrot of that history that you can see in the photographs, right? There's dozens and dozens of people watching this thing be constructed from scratch. And there's absolutely not a single paragraph mentioned about the 1954 restoration. You know something's up. History is not remotely like what they said it was like. And I know that a lot of you know that when it comes to, probably the last 300 or 400 years. Part of me is talking about the history of Babylonia, history of Sumerian times, the history of Baghdad, the history of Egypt in general, history of the Mayans, history of China. I'm going to tell you right now, my belief in the Asian culture's origins is Asians started in North America. The whatever pygmy races, which were in South America, moved up into North America, literally crossed over the Alaskan peninsula there, and sailed across into Asia, which is why Asia looks like a fungus growing off the side of that continent, because they came through from North America into that area and grew into the more Anglo-Saxon, perhaps African areas. They didn't start over there, I don't think. Because when I look at my friends who are Asian, and I look at my friends who are Mexican, my friends who are Native American, sometimes I get flashback. I get flashes of like overlap of facial geometry, and I think, geez, you guys are from over here, I think that's cooler that way. Way cooler that way. The amount of facial hair that a Native American grows is almost congruent with people from Asia. Well, us hairy white bastards, we're very similar. I don't mean to digress too much, but why not? But ancient history, it's a big part of the big everything algorithm. But my friends who have the everything uneasiness are sort of in that realm of what's surprising to me before I get into these examples is that they feel uneasy in sort of an insecure way. It's almost as if they feel scared that the amount of information they've been told is not true, because when you look inside your heart to reconstruct reality, because everyone needs a model of reality. We do. And you can't readily go out and get it from the internet or from any of the knowledge that you have, and even pushing things together and deducing things is difficult. I think that's where the uneasiness starts. I can't say I'm completely excited about a clean slate moment in my life where I think about a clean slate, but I quickly fill it up in my brain. So if I go back to clean slate history of existence and just simply saying, man, I don't even know what we are physically. Are we in a computer simulation inside of a firmament dome, or are we genetically evolved through the universe? Were we spliced by aliens? I'm going to tell you right now, if the bones that we have seen of prehistoric bipedal creatures are true and real, then for me, we're spliced with aliens for damn sure. And what's really weird about that is that people get all bent out of shape. They start thinking about X-Files and gray aliens and stuff, and it's like, there's no reason to feel weird, people. If we could do it, we would, right? If we could get in spaceships and fly all over the universe and find some indigenous creature that we think our DNA could be spliced into, and we can give them a larger cranium, put meat proteins in their genome to get them to think better, bigger visual cortex, bigger brains, all that stuff, we would do it. Unless we had a prime directive to say we wouldn't do it, but I think that would somehow break down. Be a little plum island out there, a little plum planet out there where we'd splice together all of our creatures, drop off scorpions, and just see what happens, If you haven't seen my episode 2, it really gets into this, So I won't repeat it. So, I usually kind of tie in a subject to your life a little bit to try and maybe give you a little bit of a boost. The first thing about the theory of everything, if you're feeling uneasy, is to, I think, don't feel, relax. Don't feel too uneasy. And the reason why is that your uncertainty is becoming everyone's uncertainty. And once man hive minds a level of consciousness, we typically go after solutions. Now, there are men and there are women who want the Bible solution. Super fast, in fact, they even fall back to the Bible. The amount of people, when they get old, that convert to Christianity blows my mind. Through your whole life, you don't believe in it, and at the last second, you take this comic book section out of a newspaper and make it your life? Make it your whole belief of the universe? Come on. Just because you might have not believed in God your whole life, and at the very end you pull your head out and you realize there probably is a central consciousness to the universe, doesn't mean a fictional character is suddenly true. You don't need that fiction to change your mind, right? Honestly, I don't really care if you pick that before you die. For me, it just is a silly correlation to me. Steve Jobs was quoted as saying that he didn't believe in a God. He was pretty much an atheist for the majority of his life, which I never heard that until this particular article came out. But they said that he wrote something before he died, and he pretty much lamented that he believed that there is a higher level of consciousness, that there's something after this life. And it always strikes me as fascinating that people with high IQs, which again, Steve, I think, actually had an IQ, the Mensa IQ, where he thought and he solved problems instead of just memorizing and repeating like your Jeopardy guy. Your Jeopardy guy doesn't have a high IQ. He or she has the ability to memorize things and repeat them. But we're all looking for a model of the universe that we can grow up into, trust, and go about our lives. The truth of the matter is that we could probably, go back to my episode on the answer, could probably just live. Just live, be in the focused moment of your life. I was looking at one of our listeners' little, her byline on her profile. And she said, this is what I do for a living. And she said, I have a son who's a cute little boy, and he is my focus. Something like that. You know who you are. And I thought, that is perfect. She's basically saying, this is what I do for a living, to bring home the bacon. This is the most important thing in my life, and I'm focused on it. And I thought, there you go. To that woman, I'm sure she's interested in what the universe is made out of, but she doesn't probably go to bed at night, tossing and turning, because she doesn't have the answer. Or there's some other answer than that answer. That's probably the answer she needs, which is the one I believe myself to be true, right? I think the first part of uneasiness about everything is when you have lived 2, 3, 4, 5 decades of your life with the assumption in your heart that you had the majority of reality figured out. You live on a heliocentric ball, going around a planet, going around a sun, flying around a galaxy flying around the universe. Jesus Christ was your savior that supposedly stopped by this one little ball in space. That's how God rolls. God's this immature kid that kills everybody. Or you're a scientist and it's all evolution and something from nothing, algorithms of the Big Bang. And then suddenly, you walk into the center of this room with me and a bunch of other people, and we're all looking at you like, you're new, right? And you're like, yeah, it's kind of weird, huh? Yeah. How surprised are you to be here? And someone goes, I'm pretty surprised. I'm still dealing with the shock of being here. I just got here. Total culture shock. I'm still dealing with being disappointed that my elders have kind of lied to me about the whole thing. And then you just sort of calm down over time. you start to realize that, the first thing that would happen, if this room really existed, and it sort of does in a virtual way, right? But again, there's something about being together physically. I wish there was a way that we could just walk through a door jamb and be teleported to this awesome lounge, right? You guys would hate my cigar, so I wouldn't be able to smoke there, but there's something about being alive and being next to a human being, right? There's a vibe off human beings. And it's the reason why Skype doesn't replace being together. One of our listeners, and I've done this myself, you're dating someone and the only thing you can do is see them through Skype. They're across town, they're across the world, and you're with them on Skype, and it's definitely awesome to be with them on Skype, But the second you get off that plane, you get out of the car, and they come around the corner with a big smile, and they hug you, and you hug them, and you feel the warmth of their body, the softness of their skin, the love literally pounding out of their heart into your heart. It's magic. It's utter and complete magic. And that's what we would have in a hive area in the middle of this room. If you were to sit in a chair, let's say I had a bunch of leather chairs, and we have this simulation with our more nerdy followers like myself helping to build this image of reality based on things that we scrutinize together. The first thing that would happen is someone would walk through that room and they'd be in that culture shock. They'd feel uneasy. Oh shit, what's going on here? But the second that you start looking around at all of us who have already done it ahead of time, and you would essentially usurp our calmness, even if it was irrational calmness, like you didn't know why or how we got to being calm, but you'd eventually calm down. And the funny thing is the next person that came through the little matrix door into our room, and you'd see their big eyes and their terror on their face. Maybe they would weep and cry, scream. You would be the authority, even, I would say, after a day or two, you would be an authority to them to calm them down and just say, you grab them by the shoulders or maybe give them a hug, or you'd say it's okay, relax. I was the same as you. 2 days ago, I was the same as you. And they did dramatize this a bit when in the Matrix, when Neo pops out of the simulation and goes to that weird floaty vehicle in the middle of the world of the real world, So that's what we need to do right now with each other. We need to make it okay that we don't know. And I have the whole episode on the unknown that I recommend you watch or listen to or whatever. Again, the bummer about these podcast listeners, and I almost can't believe how shitty these podcast listeners are. They simply won't go back. It's all a feed. It's an RSS feed off a website, and it won't dial backwards more than 30 episodes. It's really strange. So if you're trying to podcast any of the old episodes, let me just digress for 1 second. You have to go to mkultraradio.com, go into probably Deep Thoughts channel, and then there's a search field that becomes available, and you can just search on unknown or something like that, for instance, and you can hit download from the website. It downloads it to your device, and you can play it at your own timetable. Discretion, that's what I was going to say. YouTube's obviously YouTube. You just keep going backwards until you find it. I think that if this room truly existed, I think one of the cool things is we would go into this room, and the first thing that would happen is, once we kind of get over the shock and awe of reality not being what we think it is, the fun part would be we'd look at each other and go, here's what's most important. You're here now. And it doesn't matter what the truth is at this exact moment. What matters is that you're here. And we're here too. And guess what? We want the same thing that you want. But let's put that aside for 1 second and just realize we have all popped out of the Matrix. When Neo pops out of the Matrix, there's no doubting he's out of the Matrix in the movie The Matrix. What he doesn't know is the answers to everything right? Is it Morpheus is teaching him the answers. He doesn't remotely have the answers to everything. He's just teaching them, hey man, there's this there's this big outside bank of human beings all being bled for their biological energy to feed these robots. Robots didn't quite have in the Matrix, they never really had an outside purpose. It was just simply to exist, which I thought was kind of short-sighted when it came to Matrix 2 and 3. If they had just simply created a purpose for those robots, what are you trying to do? Are you the Borg? Why not make it the Borg? Why not make it some big giant, object floating in space or something? Shit, I don't know. Maybe they're battling other human races and some other, assimilation model or something. I don't know. That's why you don't care about Matrix 2 and 3. It's just fighting the old war from the first movie. Now, a bunch of this, I think this actually, if the room existed and you came into it, I think that almost the tutorial video we'd have to show you in some little side room is sort of what I was talking about in the episode The Answer. Before you worry about what we're made out of, where we came from, you just need to understand that the most important thing that you're doing here is living and being, right? You would just be curious about how does it work? Man's inquisitive. And I don't understand, like I've told you guys many times, I think the reason why man adventures in the world is because some men who are adventurers and women, you get tired of patterns. You get tired of looking at the same vista sometimes. Now, because of the internet, we can look on the internet and see the other vistas, and so we lose our curiosity of jungle. Once you see a 1-foot spider in the jungle, you're like, okay, I don't need to explore that area of the world. We've satiated ourselves through artificial imagery, to not need to explore. But what I can't really put a finger on, and unless something hits me right now, I'm talking to you guys, what I don't understand is the curiosity that kills the cat algorithm. I don't know. Why does curiosity exist to the extent that we'll go to any extent to find out how things are made? Why do we care? Because we do, man. We so care about the history of mankind. And I don't know if it's part of the alien promise where if we, I know that one of the alluring things about Nikola Tesla is that you figure out that the guy had figured out electricity 100%. You figured out how to harness free electricity from the ethereal atmosphere. I mean, I don't care if you're a flat earther or a round earther. He proved it happens. Okay? Once you prove ether exists, you prove gravity and how that works, right? So I don't like hearing anymore. We don't know what gravity is. Stop. Okay? When Faraday and Tesla both discovered ether, and so did Eric Dollard in 1979, with a really long wire, 11-foot wire, you have the solution for gravity. You have exactly what it is, and you also have an explanation for all atomic mass in the universe. All we're doing is categorizing the collisions and an entanglement of ethereal winds to become perceivable energy. The more tangled it gets, the slower it moves, and the more we call it mass. The less tangled it gets, the faster it moves, and the more we call it energy, which is why they're interchangeable. There's no difference between a proton, an electron, and a neutron. It's the same stuff. It's just different magnitudes of mass entangled on each other. And because some of it's entangled in a particular way, it gets a positive charge, relatively speaking, to our measurement systems, and the other one is a negative. One's super tiny, one's big. One's a cloud, one's more localized. Right? Electron is considered a cloud. Sorry, it's like dropping under 65 degrees out here. But I don't know why we need to know the mechanics. I mean, we feel like we need it. That's the weird thing, right? But we do believe that when we go back, that if we found out how they stacked the pyramids, for instance, that somehow that would give man a distinct advantage over the present and the future. And we're probably right. Like I've said several times, I actually, when I asked the question about what to do as an episode, I can tell that people haven't heard all the episodes because I got a lot of repeats for things or requests for things I've already covered. But because I didn't name the episode, the exact name of your subject, you don't know what's out there. So I'm going to be replying before this video publishes. I'm going to reply with the links directly to your comment and show you the videos that you're wanting to hear. I think one of the things that's interesting is that when it comes to the theory of everything, is that we feel like we've been cheated and lied to, and that makes us angry. And once we realize we've been lied to and cheated about so much, that's where we have anger that's recessive and anger that is obvious, and we want to, I think if the people that lied to us are still alive, we want to punish them and stop them from lying. And, when they get into really high positions of power, it's extremely frustrating, right? It's amazing how this country has an utterly apprehended Hillary Clinton and just put cuffs on her and put her in jail. Right? She's hidden 30,000 messages. Now we have evidence that she sold, all kinds of stuff for money. She sold information for money. She sold weapons for money. I mean, she just basically took her coveted position in government and hoarded herself out for bribes to build up a fortune. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Lied on camera about getting off a plane under gunfire. Seriously, man. How do you vote for a person like that? Like, you have to be one insecure human being to think that somehow you can blow that off. And I know I can make a phone call right now to one of my closest relatives and ask them who you're voting for, and they're going to say Hillary. And if I say, what about her lying about getting off a plane under gunfire? We're going to hear some stupid excuse. But this is where we get, I think, the first kernel of anger when it comes to everything. We're angry that we know we're good people. We're angry that we know that we wouldn't do a thing to deceive another human being unless it was for a surprise birthday party or Christmas for a child. And then the second tier of the conversation is, well, we want to punish the person who did it, but the second tier is, what the hell was the truth in the first place? Now, with Hillary Clinton trying to make herself out to be some maverick Navy SEAL and lie about getting off a plane under gunfire, that's just a lie to bolster her sagging self-perception. But when we have, I would say, the Catholic Church rewriting history forever, right? Destroying other people's religions to make sure they're the only game in town. Again, like I said, I wrote a film on Cuchulainn from Ireland. Well, Cuchulainn is the story of Christ. It's just a different guy, and it's 2,500 years before Christ. All right. Well, who screwed up that story? The reason why the research for that character is so deep and so intense, the reason why there's so many weird annexy stories about that guy is because they were all added to him after the fact to make him immoral. The Christians barnacled onto his story that he slept with a bunch of prostitutes, had an illegitimate son, and then killed his son, which was a archetype that they stole from an old parable out of the Arabic fictional world. They just stuck it right on him. So you can't like Cuchulainn. He sleeps with whores. He has illegitimate sons, and then through his own hubris, he creates a situation where his son dies. But it's okay if our God murders his own son to save you. That's cool. And it's okay if you cannibalistically eat his body and drink his blood every Sunday. That's totally awesome. But we think that, devil worshippers who sacrifice children and eat them are bad. Okay, what's the difference? What's the difference is symbolically eating God's son every Sunday and watching some royal Jimmy Savile, douchebag do the same thing. What's the difference? Oh, they really do it and we just do it symbolically. Oh, okay. That brain, that little circuitry in your brain is exactly the same for them and you. What difference is they got high off all the endorphins in the little child's body when they drink their blood. If you haven't seen my episode on Satan, go see it now. So we're angry. We want to set the record straight. I understand your frustration. But here's what I think, owe to ourselves. We owe it to ourselves to not get caught up in the deceit and the archetypal emotions of deceit. So someone tells a lie. And let me reset the emotional playground of existence. Let's say we have a plane of existence that we're in, right? We're in a planet, right? We're in a plane of existence and everyone's good, which means that the frequency of thought is nice. It's euphoric. It's a little utopia, right? And somehow something goes wrong. Either one of these non-player characters is programmed to tell a lie, to create a little bit of friction in there to test those around that spot, or something goes wrong, a mutation where someone turns into a Hillary Clinton, or a serial rapist like her husband. And I'm not left or right. Even though I think Donald Trump's got some cool things, I'm not right. I'm a constitutionalist. I'm an alienable right guy. But then that negativity is injected into the universe. Let's go with computer simulation for now. A non-player character who David Icke would say is a reptilian-infested human being. I just think maybe they're not human. Maybe they're a simulation of human. They're a character in our play to test our resolve. How are you going to prove that you will fight for good if there's no bad in the universe? Maybe this is part of the game. So we don't need to lose our cool and get, emotional. We just need to hive mind up a consciousness between each other, right? So last thing we want to do in our beautiful room here is to allow that archetype of deceit and acidic emotion to infest us. We don't want that, So how do we do it? Some of the greatest films out there have had heroes that were level-headed. And of course, they have to write the characters that are not level-headed. I think one of the greatest examples is Aliens, the second one, with Sigourney Weaver and Bill Paxton. Bill Paxton's character is, he's the Nukem from space kind of guy, and he's the utter panicky archetype. He's in there for a very specific reason. His dialogue was written brilliantly by Cameron for a very specific reason, to show that over-emotional archetype. There's always that guy in a movie. In the Star Trek series on television after like 87, The Next Generation and up, you had your Rikers from that episode, from that season, or that show, I should say, where he's always the overacting character that's always just totally emotional constantly, right? With Deep Space Nine, you had your Kiras and your Odos, which were just acidic characters to the series, You just wanted to turn the TV off every single time they walked on the camera and started being irrationally angry and childish. For Voyager, it's pretty much your Tom Paris, your B'Elanna characters, over-emotional, can't control themselves. Eventually it was 7 of 9 for a while, monotone and knee-jerky. And that's why I like Enterprise, which started in 2001, where there really wasn't a character like that in the entire setup. Everyone was rational and intelligent, as you would assume them to be after going through Starfleet Academy. How could someone be a childish, emotional person and get through Starfleet Academy and get a coveted position on an NS-class spaceship, right? I believe in Star Wars there was a beautiful balance in that, the naivete of Luke Skywalker for at least the first show, whereas you got little ebbs of that, And Han Solo had his slight ebbs, but Han Solo was so weathered. You had the sentient female Leia who just thought the guys were always overreacting, and she always brought him back to center. It was great. And everyone else was pretty cool, right? Darth was pretty cool. Tarkin was pretty cool. C-3PO, well, he was sort of always the panicky guy, but he was never empowered to make a lot of change, so he was always kind of doing what he's told because he is a robot. R2-D2 is the sarcastic little dude, right? But in our room, I think at best we want to be an amalgamation of all of them, and I think part of it's to say, well, I have to say when the subject of Stonehenge being rebuilt in 54, whether it was 3000 BC and they moved the rocks, and there's evidence that that's the case, but we know it was constructed in 54. We're all in the room and we're all going, holy crap, really? Really? This thing was put together in 54? In fact, when you see some of the rocks and they have the concrete slabs poured inside them so that they'll stay up, everyone who visits Stonehenge since 54 should have said, oh, well, someone's done reconstruction work. I can tell. But that's not the way it's taught. So we need to create a compartmentalization. There's the whole Kubler-Ross thing where it's anger, denial, and acceptance. We have that within this realm of our room. But I think that instead of, was it anger? It's denial, anger, and acceptance. Excuse me. We have to help each other go through these phases. And I've mentioned this several times on the show. But I just want to get rid of this fleeting feeling of disorientation and get to an emotion of happiness and certainty, of saying at least we know what we don't know. Isn't that a much better state of being than not knowing and feeling terrified? The whole flat earth movement, it's reemerging miraculously out of the tail end of 2015. You have a group of people, like I said in my episode, I think it's 43 or whatever, it's being usurped greatly by the Christians who have felt extremely marginalized in this modern era. Once the printing press came around, especially photography, there's no more miracles anymore because you can't make them up on paper. When you write a book, potentially like 1,600 years ago or 1,400 years ago, and you start saying a guy walks on water and turns water into wine, but then wine is bad. I love that one. The idea is you can get away with it because there's no way to confirm it. And now they're upset that one, Christ doesn't come back. Of course, they always say he's coming back during their generation. Whatever generation is alive always says he's coming back tomorrow. That's what's funny. It's time to move on, folks. Again, live your life. If your children worshiped you like you worship God and Jesus, you'd be so upset with yourself. You would have failed your kids. Kids need to go out and live their own life, not sit around worshiping mommy and daddy constantly. And if you need that kind of worship, something's wrong with you, right? But if the firmament isn't God-based and Jesus-based, which is about 5% of the population of this planet, 95% of people wouldn't be invited into the firmament argument, right? Then you would be upset that it exists this way, and you wouldn't know what's going on. But I mean, here's the thing. Here's what I think is really, really weird about people who worry about alien invasions and this, this ridiculous story arc, which is that aliens are going to come down and enslave us. Let me tell you, folks, if that was their job, if that was their goal, we wouldn't have known anything other than that, because they spliced us together and then they would have stayed. They wouldn't have ran off and then come back later. You don't think we're ready to go right now as human beings? We know how to mine everything out of the ground. We know how to create nuclear weapons, supposedly, right? All right. Well, we're ready to be harvested, but it's not happening, is it? If the firmament was true, then I would think that you would have to assume that something's protecting us. Maybe this 1954 treaty of the Antarctica is there to protect us even further from maybe something that's irrelevant, which is what's outside the firmament. Maybe there's nothing out there. Maybe there's other firmaments, but they don't need us, right? Maybe we're not supposed to invade someone else's world. Maybe their atmosphere doesn't work for our lungs and ours doesn't work for theirs. Maybe our viruses and our bacteria will kill them and theirs will kill us. So it's just stay in your own little dome, enjoy your life. You've been given a beautiful existence. NASA, perhaps, if I'm just going to go with this for a second, this is not for me to tell you this one way or the other. It's just to use a metaphor of thought, right? If NASA is giving you the sense that we're in a ball, so you calm down, you don't think we're in a firmament. They put science fiction shows out there like Star Wars and all the movies out there, like Gravity and Interstellar and all that stuff that show the world as a ball and all that kind of stuff, right? Even if that weren't true, which I'm not convinced it's not true, but even if it weren't true, it's most likely there to, and I'm not giving these guys a clean bill of health. I don't like people stealing our money and lying to us. But maybe it's there in the end to simply, maybe they're non-player characters, right? Maybe all these folks are non-player characters. They use the same avatars, to make astronauts survive after crashes, after explosions, But maybe it's because relative to us, it is about raising your children, like the listener I talked about. She's focused on making a little boy's life wonderful, being a good mom, bringing home the bacon. What's wrong with that? That's why I like the fact that Donald Trump has 4 kids, 3 of which we have essentially met virtually, through television. And they all seem to be extremely centered people, well-educated, humble, wonderful people. There's no TMZ articles on these folks, doing drugs and, sleeping around, creating porns to get popular. They are almost out of the mind's eye of people. Love it. Absolutely love it. I can tell you right now, I've managed to luck out in the creation of my daughter. She's turned out to be absolutely an ideal child, sort of like a Trump kid, right? But if I had, 3 more of those kids, I think that getting lucky once is something that a lot of us do in business and in art and bearing children. But to do it over and over and over, my grandparents had 5 kids. All 5 kids are extremely respectable, amazing people. Even if I don't believe what they believe or whatever, it doesn't matter. They're still sweet human beings. So they win. My grandparents figured it out. And they had no manual, And I bet a lot of you have too. You guys have created great kids. In fact, I know some of you more personally, and we've Skyped together, and I see the pictures of your kids, and they're just darling beings, We're on the right track, people, Some of me believes that a lot of the religious stories that have been created to satiate man's curiosity are simply there because the elders, like the elders from my church back in 1990 actually, told me, they said, look, there's no proof that Jesus Christ existed, and you know what? He may not have existed. But they told me this is better for mankind that they do believe he exists, because the people that do believe that Jesus Christ exists typically take his story and apply it to their own life, and they have better morals, and they have empathy and sympathy for people, and they are just good human beings. The Mormon kids that used to come to my house, by the way, they stopped. I think they're completely delusional, utterly and completely delusional. But you know what else they are? They're good people. They are good people. And I'm sure it's every, religion that's balanced. Same thing. And I don't have Hindus coming to my house, but I guarantee you they started bringing me this consciousness chakra model of the universe. Man, I'm right there. The glands are your touch points to reality. So what if all this paradigm of existence is merely to satiate a temporary stage of existence? What if our true being is our soul, our energy pattern that is who we are, that when we die, we leave this mortal coil, and maybe for a while we bounce inside the firmament and or this ball, I don't give a shit either way. Before I believed that there was any chance of a firmament existing, let's put it that way. And I'll tell you this, when I look at the walls of ice that are the concave walls of ice in the Antarctica, the cliffs of ice, let's just put it that way, and how utterly different they look than the Arctic, the North Pole. It looks like a barrier in the South Pole, in the South region, right? This barrier idea of these flat earth folks, right? It really feels firmament-y, when you look at the way the sun sets, and when you look at the angle of light that pops out of the sun when it sets, it looks like a kind of a shortened dome. It doesn't seem to bounce off an atmosphere of a purely circular nature, of like a ball. It seems more like a oval, but maybe that's just my lack of understanding of refraction of light. But anyway, the idea is, what if once we pass this test and either get off this ball or get off this flat disk, and we float around the universe, and we're sort of on a DMT trip constantly, right? We're in the universe, we're participating with each other, having a great time, but we don't have a body anymore. And how could we understand existence without a body if we don't really understand the existential properties of true living, right? What if, like I said before, what if reality is the mathematics of existence, right? And you guys haven't seen my sacred geometry episode, which I don't even know if it's any good anymore. I filmed it last year. I just cannot find the time to put this thing together. I'm stuck on a Coral Castle animation I'm working on, but I'm also working on a bunch of other stuff. I'm going to have time in probably the next month to get to that. But I'm working on some new projects here to pay the bills. So, what if, again, I've said it before, but what if the entire universe, just as a metaphor, is a big stainless steel bowl with nothing in it, just energy bouncing around, and the entities, and the perception of reality, and the reality that we have is the reality we've created as a consciousness, as a collective consciousness. And it doesn't really have a purpose in mathematics. What's the purpose of 1 and 1 equals 2? There's no purpose in that. It's a method. It's a mathematical method of existence. All right. What if we want a purpose? What if we're ingenious enough to create a purpose out of nothing? Well, then it's going to have constraints. If you've ever watched my episode on screenplay writing, which is episode 8, when you run it, it says episode 7, which is kind of funny. I tell you that, writers misunderstand the value of constraints. I'll give an example. You want to write a sci-fi movie, and I say, here are the parameters of your sci-fi movie. There are no parameters. You do exactly what you want. You create the characters that you want. There's no limitations. And I send that group off to write that script. And there's a countdown going on for when they're going to have the first treatment to me. And then I pull the group aside and I say, here is your sci-fi movie constraints. You are in the Star Wars universe. Here are the first 7 movies of Star Wars. Watch them, study them. Here's the 300 books that have been published about the Star Wars universe. Read them, study them, and then write me the script. Now, let's just say that we subtract out their research time, right? Watching all those movies, and maybe they just use the movies and not the books. And I say, get me a treatment for episode 8. Or you can do a spinoff. Some other part of the galaxy is fighting this Imperial force. They're going to have their treatment a lot faster than the folks that are out there with nothing. And because it's already pre-certified, they're going to have a lot more interesting things to do, unless this other group becomes amazingly inventive, right? Because they got lightsabers and the Force. They got a dark side and a light side. They're pre-existing characters that we already know and we love. So constraints are great. Constraints make reality a lot easier to create and digest. By the way, for you flat earthers, I didn't put this in any of my failed attempts to create a part 2. Don't forget the Egyptians, Anut, the woman that is the firmament, right? Her legs and her arms are the firmament, and the stars are painted on her belly, and her arms and her legs. It's interesting how it goes all the way back to them. And again, if Graham Hancock's research is correct, then that goes back at least 35,000 BC. So I guess what I want to leave you with here is that I want you to be excited about the unknown of everything. Be excited about the fact that if you're feeling uncertain, I assume you've been waking up for the last maybe 24 months, 2 years, maybe even less. And you're just like, damn, what's going on with this whole planet, right? Feel excited that at least the conversation is open and we're hive minding a lot more than we used to. But please, if this episode interests you and you can make it to this point in the episode, if you haven't seen the episode on the answer, watch that. And then watch the very next episode, which is the origins of man, which is getting a massive viewing. I can't believe it. It's one of my crappiest episodes, in my opinion. I got some down thumbs on that episode. I was like, yeah, I earned those down thumbs. But now on my top 10 list of videos, and it's not just people who've pushed play. I don't care about the play count. It's the number of minutes listened to. The Origin of Man is, which is like 79 or something like that. It's in the top 6. It's nuts, right? I think the answer is way better. So I know I'm grabbing people because of keywords from time to time. But, if they just push the button and they don't like what they hear, it doesn't get to the top 10, that's for sure, right? I'm always... what I'm trying to do here is give you my sense of security and give you my sense of calmness to sort of leapfrog you over those tumultuous moments of uncertainty, because I don't want you to have that feeling. I want you to live your life, and I want you to have a good time. And honestly, if I were to divide up the percentages or suggest how to divide up the percentages of your dedication to your existence, maybe do 80, 90% your life, completely your life and your productivity and raising your kids and getting your career going and being creative and just loving each other, right? Finding ways to really love each other, not just say the word. Again, friendship isn't just a title. Friendship is a collection of actions that you do for another human being, right? The other percentage that's left is, I think, the exploration of your reality. But, I want it to be happy for you. I want it to be exciting for you. And sure, you're going to be upset when people disagree with you or hang on to the past. And just realize they're not in the room yet, right? They're not in our center room. They're not in the eye of the storm. They're in the storm. And you probably won't have an opportunity, if you think about the metaphor of like the eye of a tornado, and our beautiful, subtle, quiet room is in the center. We don't hear the storm. We can see it. Our walls fluctuate and rotate, right? And the debris is out there. All that disinformation debris is in the outer ring around us. And you can walk up to the wall, look into it. It's terrifying, right? Because that's where you used to be. And you can see your friends out there. And one of your friends is 30 feet away from you. Because this storm is thick, man. It's like 2 or 3 miles thick. And all of the population exists in that storm who haven't walked into this room of at least trying to pursue the truth. But one of your friends walks right up to the wall and stares. Right? They're staring, and metaphorically in the world, what they're doing is maybe looking at a YouTube video. Maybe at that point, you can reach your arms through the wall, through that chaos. Maybe one of us grabs your stomach to make sure you don't get sucked back into bullshit, but you grab them by the lapels and you yank them into a room. We all, on 3, boom, and we pull them into the room. And they get to see calmness. An intellectual calmness of uncertainty, of the unknown, but mechanisms to live in it and have that culture shock. Maybe put him in a decompression chamber where we, just like Neo, when he was pulled out of the Matrix, he sores all over his body. He had to sleep and rest, and he's fed that goop. Maybe that's what we have to do with our friends. But don't be surprised if in that process, our friends want to go back into the storm. And maybe that's what we learn about the process, is that we do have friends that want to go back into the storm because it's too terrifying. They want to grab their Bible. They want to jump back in the storm and grab their Bible and try to find the solutions in their Bible. And you have to give them that patience and that time. But just remind them this. This is my mantra on the show, right? Other than learn the rules that rule you. But Truth predicts the future. The other mantra is when you think a true thought. It is the most clear, beautiful thing that happens to your human physiology. And some people would lament, well, I think about Jesus and I have that exact feeling, so Jesus is true. You don't have that feeling. You really wish you had that feeling when you think about Jesus. You know, if you think about the Holy Spirit, well, you're probably just thinking about a slice of the old universe that flows through you. Call it the Holy Spirit if you want. I call it that every once in a while. It's fine with me. Give it a name. But I think God's the universe, so a piece of God, which is the Holy Spirit, according to Christians, fine. You're just opening up your aperture of your blood supply, of your inhale to metabolize a slice of the universe, a frequency of the universe, right? But they might want to go back into the storm. We got to be okay with that too. Just be glad that I think you're in this room with us. I don't mean to create some sort of mini elitism, but we have to be able to acknowledge that we are in this room and we're trying. And I'm sorry if my little, I guess you could call it anarchy paradigms of belief within the storm, like someone like Donald Trump, and you don't. I don't mean to offend you, I just think that everyone is pussyfooting around political correctness, and so, my Trump episode, which is, I'm going to put an adult language parenthetical on the title, because I forgot to do that. People need to know what they're getting into. I just think that's the way I believe about the guy. It's how passionate I believe about the guy. I have vetted what I believe to be the weak points in his chain to see if I think he's fake. He could be pulling one over on me. But I do think that people, the one thing I didn't mention was that I think that people are afraid of true men in this world. The females that are for Bernie, they're matriarchs. When I go to their house and I look at the way they treat their husbands, they're matriarchs. And there's nothing wrong with a strong woman, but the woman that wants a dominator man typically is for Bernie, because Bernie's a pussy. And they like that. I can feel stronger than this guy. But when Donald Trump walks in the room, he's formidable to them because he's a man. He's a true man. Doesn't mean he's right. Doesn't mean I don't like the fact he doesn't like Snowden, supposedly. I don't like the fact that he writes Israel blank check. I think Israel incubates a lot of negativity in this world. I don't mind if Israel exists, but just chill the fuck out, would you? But then again, I'm basing my opinions off what I think might be true, and I might be completely disinfoed in my opinions about Israel. But when I see soldiers defect and say that we're the ones firing the rockets and blaming it on Palestine, man, those guys have nothing to gain. They're on a hit list somewhere, I'm sure, for rebutting their own country. Just like Snowden's on a hit list, literally, for snubbing his country. Just like supposedly the Julian Assange guy with WikiLeaks. I don't know if either one of these guys. I think Julian Assange might be a complete plant, and Snowden is just it's Snowden, which is funny. I think that name is absolutely poetic. When someone snows you over, they bullshit you, and calling that guy Snowden, I think, is just an on-point pun of his existence. He has been snowed over himself, right? But I think he's genuinely maybe duped himself. I don't know. You don't get into intelligence agencies, even as a consultant, if you have a discernible, critical mind of your own. But I hope the guy's real. But I don't think he deserves any punishment whatsoever for what he's done. Even if he's wrong. I think he's trying to be right, or trying to do the right thing. But as I always say, I think you feel me. Hope this was useful to you guys. Hope this puts some of you at ease. And if you get this sort of stuff, if you get what I'm saying, and you're like, yeah, that's cool, please do what you can to do your own version of spreading this information so we can calm people down. We don't have to have all the answers right now to live completely wonderful lives and take care of our kids. That's the most important thing we can do right now, is take care of them. I forgot to mention about this education. On my Trump episode, I said that, schools that send kids home with too much homework, it's trying to separate your children from you. So I forgot to mention one little trick you can do for your kid. Do your kid's homework. Do your kid's homework for them. And you sit them down and you say, this is our little secret, because you deserve to be with the family as soon as you come home. And, if you want to make sure your child understands the homework, sure, you do it with them. You make them sit down with you. And if your kid doesn't get it on the first day, don't freak out if you're doing fractions and fraction, plus and minus stuff, multiplication with that kind of stuff. Just, realize you're going to have to make sure they understand before the test comes, but do their homework for them if you can. If your kid's supposed to write a book report, you tell them what to write and put it in their own words, Maybe don't give it to them verbatim in sentences that they transcribe and the teacher thinks that suddenly they have an IQ of 140 because you do. Fight back that way. My kid was so good with their homework. I forgot to, I was wondering, what, did I have this problem? My kid had a lot of homework, but man, she'd sit down and she needs some help for like 2 seconds. All my kid needed to do was ask me the question of how to solve the problem. And I'm halfway through the sentence of asking her to clarify what she just asked me, and she'd go, oh, I get it, and she'd finish it for herself. So she was never really overwhelmed with too much homework until college. And maybe college is where they really have to sit and bust their butts, because that's the way the world works, right? Bust your butts during the day, manage your own time. As soon as they get the 9 to 5, hopefully they don't have to work at home, And this is what they love to do, like me, right? I work at home. I work all the time. Little digression. When I work at home, the funny thing is, if I'm with a bunch of computer people or artistic people, and I go home and I bang something out really, really quick, my professional friends and professional employers who are in the paradigm of what I do, and I get hired by people to do consulting work sometimes, and they're not computer people. And the funny thing is, I'll make it look easy to them. And then they get this, if I work for them for multiple months or a couple of years, they start to get the opinion that I'm not working because I made it look easy. And they think it was easy. It's really, really funny. I don't even really blame them, but it's sort of unfortunate when it happens, but I can only work for a client like that for a fixed number of months because the attrition on them is crazy. And as much as I try to tell them, look, this is where it was really hard and this is what I had to do to make it look great. This is like cutting a diamond. You look for minutes and minutes and minutes to figure out how to hit that diamond perfectly to get the perfect shape on it. They still don't get it, which is all right. So I got to kind of vacillate between pros and novices. Helping pros sometimes is the most entertaining thing you can do. So anyway, I'll shut up. If you haven't been already, go to mkultraradio.com. The main benefit there is to find all the feeds. Again, if you're coming through a podcast and you haven't heard every single episode of Deep Thoughts, these things have grown on you. You like them. You're going to have to go to the website, probably search, download the MP3s to your device, and just carry them with you. Again, I made a ton of episodes I didn't like. I have one on time management that's coming. I'm probably going to put this one out ahead of time before that one. I don't know if the time management one's any good. I've had a couple rough episodes where I tried to talk for an hour and I just feel like, sometimes I'm out of body when I do these episodes. I listen to them. It's like, who is that guy talking? Especially if I like anything I say, I typically don't remember saying it. It's really weird. So maybe the universe is channeling through me. I don't know. Hopefully it's working for you. But anyway, this has been About Everything, Deep Thoughts Radio. Please take care of yourself and somebody else. And as always, I will see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.